Hi, y'all. I'm Nicole. I recently joined the .NET Foundation in a community manager capacity. I'm excited to get started in the role by bringing you the interviews for the board candidates. Hi there. Can you please introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David McCarter, also known as .NET Dave. I was known as VB Dave, but that's, I've changed to .NET Dave now. I started as a professional developer back in 1994, and that year was a big year for me. And that's also the year I started getting into community. And so I've been doing community work ever since 1994, where I founded the San Diego Visual Basic User Group because I had a strong feeling how I needed to learn how to speak in front of people someday. And so that was my way of forcing myself into this situation. And that group, in the early 2000s morphed into the .NET, San Diego .NET Developers Group. And we had our first meeting in April of '94. My first talk was July '94, and that talk wasn't even about code, it was about writing help files. So I've been big into documentation ever since then. I was president for most of the 20 years that it ran, and I retired in 2014, and my group morphed into the San Diego .NET user group, which still meets to this day. So I'm really glad that's continuing here in San Diego. Also started my first website. I piggyback off of Carl Franklin's server back in 1994, and now it's called .NETtips.com, where I'm continuously writing. And I look at my traffic every once in a while, and the most different traffic I saw one time was somebody in the Vatican is reading my blog. I thought that was pretty cool. In '97, I started teaching at the University of San Diego with my good friends Woody Pewitt and Michelle LaRue Bustamante, where we started an extensions group at the university. The three of us started that. And in 2000, I actually got them the ball rolling to start teaching .NET. And our first class of .NET, because of me, was April 2001. And so I've been teaching .NET ever since then. I've been on the board of 2 universities. I became a patent inventor at ProFlowers.com in the 2000s. I started publishing books in '97 and never stopped. I'm always writing on a book continuously. 2006, I became a Microsoft MVP. 2017, I became a featured writer on MVP and an MVP on C# Corner, where I have over 1.1 million reads now, which I think is pretty incredible. And this year, I ran my first conference through the website, where we have over 78,000 viewers so far. And so to me, that's just really awesome because it was all about code quality. I started releasing open source software in the mid-2000s on Codeplex, and now I have 3 major projects running on GitHub, ranging from the .NET Framework to .NET 5. Last year, I also started the video weekly internet show called Rockin' a Cold World with .NET Dave, where we average 5 to 13,000 viewers for each episode. I've won more awards than I can remember anymore, but one of my favorites was the INETA Community Leader Award, since I was nominated and voted by my peers, and I always felt that award was more special than a lot of. Well, they're all special, but I thought that one affected me the most. I think. I've worked for many great teams and too many not so great, and I continuously strive to make our world better and code better. I also work really hard to support an NGO that I visited in India during one of my conference trips, where all the profit from one of my books goes to the NGO now, and they've been able to restart the vocational training because of that. And I'm also working on a new book, a cooking book, that 100% of the proceeds will go to the Voice of Slum and NGO in India also. I love coding and being part of the community after all these years. Everything I do except for my full-time job is geared to give back to the community. And, I'll never stop either one of those things.
That's awesome. If you have any questions for the candidates, please tweet them to the official .NET Foundation Twitter handle, but let's jump into the questions. What excites you about the future of the .NET ecosystem?
Well, most of the people who know me already know that I'm 110% into the Microsoft ecosystem. I mean, my name's .NET Dave, so I don't know why anybody would ask me Java questions or things like that. One of the biggest reasons I'm 110% into the Microsoft ecosystem is because their systems work together. They might not be perfect by any stretch, but they are geared to work together, including Azure. I've worked with many teams at Microsoft to make our world and code better and tools better. And that's really my favorite part of being a Microsoft MVP program is I have real impact on future versions of Visual Studio and other things that have come out in Visual Studio. There actually are some ideas, some features in Visual Studio that are my ideas that came from being at the Microsoft MVP Summit every year. And lately in Microsoft, early in Microsoft, Microsoft didn't really embrace other ecosystems, right? And Apple is still that way pretty much, right? But with Microsoft's change in direction, in the last 5+ years, or since they've gone to open source, they are embracing all ecosystems, which I think is really exciting, that you can do everything pretty much in one place instead of going to lots of different framework sites and things like that.
What role do you think the .NET Foundation can play to inspire more confidence in .NET?
Well, the biggest thing to me is reaching out to developers to embrace and get them to stay in the .NET ecosystem. As developers, we have a lot of say, much of the time, in teams on the direction on the projects are going, and especially if you're more at a lead or an architect level, we have really a power to change things. And so I think that the organization can help out with that. A non-Microsoft organization can inspire developers and teams more, in my mind, than Microsoft can. Because Microsoft is always, to me, always sounds like they're marketing something where, a lot of what we bring to people are real world issues that we deal with every day. And I think that's where, foundations like this, and I do this in my writing, is try to make that better, and strive to make that better. And some of the ways I've thought of doing that, with the foundation is work with speakers, of course, because we're the mouths of, .NET. Work with open source developers too. I think there's a lot of work we need to do to make projects better in the open source world. And also on top of that, provide videos and even maybe internet shows and podcasts, internet shows kind of like my weekly show to, inspire people to either stay or join the Microsoft ecosystem.
Speaking of open source, how can the .NET Foundation help open source projects be more successful and gain credibility?
Yeah, I thought a lot about this, and I've always been wary or skeptical of open source projects, ever since they started coming out, because mostly they're not backed by a large corporation like Microsoft, right? Well, they are kind of now at Microsoft because they're, a lot of their stuff is open source, but I'm talking about the early days of open source. And so I think that's part of the problem. I think people don't trust a single person or a group of people as much as they would like an organization like Microsoft or Google or Apple. So one of the things that Foundation can do is create a way to ensure open source. I'm saying open source projects too much. Open source projects on the Foundation site adhere to a common set of standards. And since I have the only pure standards book about .NET out, I'm really big into standards, of course, to show confidence for teams to use open source software. With some, I haven't thought through this completely yet, but with some kind of award or recognition to ensure code bases follow a minimum standards. And the minimum standards I kind of feel to me that I would bring up immediately is making sure the code adheres to open coding standards, because I've looked at a lot of the code, including Microsoft's, and they don't. And so to make sure that it's a common set of coding standards are being used, that the open source projects use at code analytics and passes code analytics systems. Open source projects should and must be very well documented. That's one of the biggest issues to me with open source projects, is the complete lack of documentation. And I work really hard, to document my open source projects. I have a new version coming out on the 1st of September, and I've been writing an article of all the new stuff in the new release for at least 2 months. So I'm really on top of documentation. The other thing I think, we need to include that, especially these days with the cloud, is making sure the code is benchmarked and publicizing those benchmarks, which I do on all my open source projects. All my open source projects, except for the .NET Framework project, has benchmarks to show people exactly how fast things are in my projects. And I strive, and this release, I strive really hard to make some of those methods a lot faster in this quarterly release. And I think, part of this also needs to look at how responsive open source developers are to issues. Because if you have an open source project, people don't like waiting a week to get an answer back, right? Because most problems are immediate. So I think at least a 24-hour turnaround is acceptable if you're going to publish something, to the open source world.
What can the .NET Foundation do around education and adoption of .NET?
Well, there's a lot of work I think we can do about this, but I would like to focus on, going into schools as low as middle school to inspire kids to get into software engineering. That's really the place that I've learned with some of my friends in the past, that we really need to start teaching kids to be excited about software engineering, and not only learn it, because I think that will help their brain development, but also maybe a career someday. So I think we have to start young. And I've been helping adults for my entire life, and college students my entire life. But I think we need to go a little younger and start inspiring people, at least in middle school and high school. The other thing I've been thinking about around this is community events to better organization of all .NET events. I'm not sure how the foundation can work this out, but as a developer and a writer, it's really hard to find where all the events are, and all the way from user groups to conferences. It would be really nice if we just had one spot we could look at things. And I think that would promote all these things a lot better if we had one spot to look at what's going on in our world. And then, education, even in teams and companies, to focus on quality. That's, someone tweeted at Facebook me that I read this morning about just the sheer lack of quality in the last 10 years. And so my goal is to, either if I do it or if I work with an organization, is to make the code quality better.
What are some things you would do right away if you joined the .NET Foundation board?
Well, kind of piggybacking off my last answer, was to see how I can start or get involved in the board with teaching topics to make open source quality better and inspire confidence in it, right? I think a lot of companies and teams have a lot of confidence issues around open source. And I've yet to see a team actually analyze the open source code before they start using it. And so I think all teams should do that, of course. And see how I can start, get involved in the board teaching kids in middle schools and high schools, maybe reaching out to continuing education and retraining groups. I thought about that recently, about retraining groups, because a lot of industries are going through change. A lot of industries are going through automation. Soon there won't be truck drivers. So what are they all going to do? And even when I taught at the university, this Southern California University in San Diego, I had some of those people in my class. And I thought that was a really cool thing that they were offered. is to, money and money to go to classes to retrain themselves to be software engineers. So I think that's something else we can look at. And just to get them and everybody excited in learning software engineering, including making it a career.
How can people find you on socials?
Well, my Twitter handle is real.netdave, or you can also find me on Rockin' the Code World. That's the handle I have for my show. I'm also on Facebook. I have a Facebook page called the .NET Army that steals the name from KISS, because when KISS was popular, they had the KISS Army, which I was part of. So now I created the .NET Army, and that's on Facebook.
Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks.